we basically met for sort of at a resort to talk about, like, how is it, like, what did we learn, and like to actually get to interact with the other side and whatnot. I remember, like, so that was like the meeting at that resort, I think took only, we stayed there for probably just 2 days or 3 days maximum. And what came out, what struck me at that point is that the Israeli school children, they had a different perception about us. So I went to so I'm a Muslim, but I went to a Catholic school, and that's that's normal over there. And so they expected us either to be, priests and nuns, or sheiks when we showed up, and it was because these kids were like too young to actually be in the military, and so when we showed up in civilian clothing, I guess, they were surprised sort of that like our class was like half female, half male, and and there we were. We were surprised on the other hand to learn that on their side, like when we would talk about checkpoints, just for me to go to visit my grandmother, I had to go through X number of checkpoints and blah blah blah. That did not register for them because they're coming from Israel proper, and they don't see that day to day. Yeah, so that was that curriculum effort, and then later that same year, I think I was the second batch, I don't know, second or third batch that participate in a program that was actually sort of started by the United States. It's called Seeds of Peace, where they basically take people from conflict areas. So they're supposed to take people from Cyprus and like a bunch of other places as well, but really the main focus is Israelis and Palestinians. They said they take Israelis, Palestinians, some Jordanians, some Egyptians, essentially people associated with that conflict, and they ship us to Maine, here, and some of them would put us somewhere in like it was actually a very nice area. Because get all these people coming from the desert and you put them somewhere where there's like a lake and just like green all over. We were just like, wow, this is awesome. And so we basically stayed there for about a month, and it's like a regular summer camp for school children essentially. And you're basically, you do these activities every day, whatever, swimming, you play with the other teams and whatnot. But there's a dedicated 2-hour period, 2-hour window, like every day, where you're supposed to sit down with the other side and just discuss politics and whatnot, and mainly sort of to learn to have civil discourse, listen to the other side's ideas, and then basically you sort of like try to foster this sense of like, look, the other side, are just human beings. It was interesting in the sense that that camp was much more organized. The Israeli sides had debate, coaching, and they had like sort of, every side comes in with some coaching, some material, some facts and whatnot. So clearly it was not just children talking about their experiences growing up. It was sort of, their experiences and this is our cause, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so that happened. Sort of the effects of that camp on me were weird because in 1999 the peace process was getting to a standstill. Like there was no progress anymore. Checkpoints started creeping up more in the West Bank, and things were sort of obvious that things are going to deteriorate. And what happened was that year after that, the second Intifada started, and things just went downhill from there. So it was weird because like at the camp you thought, okay, this could actually work because look at us, we're getting along. Plus we were all teenagers at that time, so like, I don't know, like it's summertime, you're away from your parents, and you're like hormones running throughout. So I don't think politics was like the number one concern. And so we did that, and then we come back, and they tried to establish this listserv, and we can communicate with one another. They established Seeds of Peace established a center in West Jerusalem to try to get people together so that like this is a safe space, you can come here, you can talk with the other side, and try to keep us all in touch. But sadly, like once the second Intifada started, you just felt a disconnect. You're like, this is just talk, and at the end of the day, I'm still getting harassed, people are still getting killed, and nothing's going to happen. And even that center that was supposed to bring us all together, the Palestinians were cut off from actually reaching it. So that kind of did not work. Yeah, so that was, but I mean, these were like two interesting experiences because people tried to, like these normalizations, through the normalization efforts, but someone's trying to take off.
Okay, and Avi, how were your perceptions basically perpetuated by the media at school? I mean, I guess you didn't go to school there, but your family, and basically the government itself and the IDF.
I think the answer is similar to what Hussam said in this is the issue. It's like this vicious cycle that won't go anywhere. Israel clearly is more organized, and there is more of like a top 10, Ministry of Education and blah, blah, blah. But I think what really kind of impacts people is the things that actually happen to you and your family, and especially after the Second Intifada. So I think there's a different kind of perception that Israelis living past the Green Line have and those living within Israel proper have. But starting with the Second Intifada and the kind of the widespread introduction of like suicide bombings, I think that really kind of messed with kids the same way that things that you happen. You walk through downtown Jerusalem now, the main drag, and there's just like restaurant after restaurant where there were suicide bombings and people were just blown to bits. And that's kind of what, and then, and if you're a kid and you think, because I've spoken to a lot of people about this, kind of how it definitely messes with your head, the same way that your father getting shot in the back and your teacher just not being there the next day. It's like, it just doesn't make sense. And then what do they tell you? I don't know, it's the other side, it's them. It was the guy who did it had a first name that sounds like this, or he did it in this cause, or he did it for this. I think it's really a vicious cycle, because then basically you're both locked into this. It's their fault, and there are things happening around you that very much reinforce that notion. I don't know, like a couple of years ago, this was recent, I don't want to talk about specifics because then it definitely sounds like you're taking a side, but just like, this is something I experienced because I lived in this community. There's this little community, and it's in the West Bank, so that opens up an entire can of worms as to why they're there. Should they not? Is it reasonable to attack on? Whatever you want. I think that's that's beside the point right now. The point is that one afternoon somebody came in, a terrorist or somebody who wasn't, somebody, I don't know what his situation was, came into the town in the middle of the day and killed this little kid. The kid was like 12 years old and axed him to death with an axe right in the town square. And there's still a pile of stones right there. And I remember, like the kids, and all this does is just like reinforce these terrible kind of, because the kid was like 12 years old, axed to death. And I worked with a carpenter while I was there, and his brother, the kid's older brother, worked in a carpentry shop too. And the whole neighborhood was just like, I don't know, like what the hell are you supposed to think, And again, what's the explanation? No, there's very little, I think, especially, and you would agree, it's not like, well, Yaakov was killed, right? Let's talk about what the political implications of this were, how this situation developed to the point where somebody felt they had to come in and kill him. That's not how it goes. It's very much, he was killed, those blah, 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 how did they do that? Oh my God. And again, that's just the continuation of this animosity on both sides. Because, we could sit here and kind of intellectually fancy ourselves as to the causes of. I imagine there's not a lot of that, though. Well, in my own experience, there's less of that. But I think, the hope is, I think that there are enough people that are willing to do that are saying, well, why did he do that? Why are they here? I don't know. Hopefully there's some place that they can.
Yeah, this is a theme that kind of got brought up when we were talking to another Israeli earlier this week. And it was that all the efforts put by the majority towards peace, towards creating normalization, can be undone very quickly by the action of one or a few people.
True.
It's like 10 steps forward, 1 step back, and then that just ruins everything.
Yeah, I'd probably say like 1 step forward, 1 step back. But
Yeah,
Yeah, I guess the thing, like actions speak louder than words, so you could talk about it as much as you want, but then when you experience something, or it's just like, probably most of that just goes to hell, you're not gonna, I don't know.
We touched on this a little bit, but for both of you, well, first for Hussam, how did things change after the Second Intifada?
Oh, okay, in a short word, I mean, the short of it is it got really bad. So what happened was that, you know, it became harder to move around for ordinary people. For businesses, and which basically sustains the livelihood of most people, you know, essentially, you know, everything that we import has to go through Israel, so, you know, that also impacted us. But sort of like on the day-to-day, the first year of the Second Intifada was mostly about people going out to the outskirts of towns, wherever that town is, and there's usually a checkpoint at the outskirts of that town, and it's sort of like an unspoken date between, you know, the Palestinians and the Israeli soldiers. The Palestinians would just go to that you know, checkpoint, throw rocks, whatever. Israelis would fire back a few things, and then like they do that for a few hours, and then everybody goes their way, and that's it. But usually, you know, sadly, I mean, obviously people get killed and whatnot. But that type of thing in the beginning was sort of more like, you know, popular, sort of like people expressing their frustration, and like sort of everyday people just would go to the street. So I know actually friends of mine in high school and in college that would just like be very frustrated, like today we're going to the checkpoint to protest and whatnot. But as this thing continued going forward, the violence escalated exponentially. So I remember, like in the beginning, again, it was all at the sort of outskirts, and then slowly you'd see IDF, the Israeli army, Hummers basically coming into town, either like taking a couple of kids or like shooting them or something, and so that sort of like obviously gets people angrier and angrier. And then as things progressed, so Ramallah has, I think, 3 settlements that are really, really close to us. And so, from one settlement, so it started escalated to, like, settlements are usually on top of hills, and Ramallah is on top of a bunch of hills as well. And so you'd see, like, at night, like, this shooting that's happening from one hill to the other. And you basically gauge, like, how bad it is by the caliber of bullets that are being fired. So once you get to like 500 millimeter, then like things are bad, because like these are the type of bullets that you can actually see when they fly at night, because they actually leave a trail that's visible, and these are really powerful. So within the first year, it was basically like friends of mine would come in and like would show us like the bullets that landed on their houses, or like that rattled their like the sides of their houses and whatnot. By the end of the first year, it escalated to Israel started a campaign of assassination for the military leaders of different Palestinian, fighting factions. And the way they would do that, and that was sort of visible for us, like on the ground as well, because the way that we'd see it, so the way they would carry that assassination is through sort of like through helicopters. So we'd see basically, we'd be sitting in the town, and Ramallah is very small, like, Ramallah and the town next to it, and the villages all around us is like 200,000 altogether. So it's not that big. So you'd see like a helicopter sort of like